They walked among us as prophets, messiahs, and divine vessels, whispering God's will to the lost and desperate. But when their visions twisted into commands of control, death, and delusion, the faithful paid the ultimate price. These are 10 harrowing true stories of men who claimed heaven's voice and unleashed hell on earth. Case 1. Jim Jones, the prophet of paradise. In the sweltering heat of a Guyanese jungle, a man who once healed the sick with a touch of his hand ordered his followers to drink poison-laced grape-flavor aid, smiling as mothers coaxed the cups to their children's lips. It was November 18, 1978, and Jim Jones had just turned his vision of heaven into the largest mass murder-suicide in history. But how did a small-town preacher from Indiana become the architect of such unrelenting darkness? Jim Jones was born in 1931 in Crete, Indiana, a dusty speck on the map where poverty clung to families like a second skin. His childhood was marked by an absent father, crippled by lung disease from World War I, and a mother who worked odd jobs to keep them afloat. Young Jim was an outsider, fascinated by death from an early age, peering into open caskets at funerals, even staging mock services for roadkill. By his teens, he found solace in the Pentecostal churches of Indianapolis, where fiery sermons and speaking in tongues offered escape from the mundane. He devoured the Bible, but twisted it through a lens of social justice, railing against racism in a segregated South. At 23, he married Marceline Baldwin, a nurse who shared his progressive ideals, and together they adopted children of mixed races, a bold statement in Eisenhower's America. Jones's charisma ignited quickly. He pastored a Methodist church before breaking away, in 1955, to found the People's Temple in Indianapolis. His services were electric, healings that seemed miraculous, prophecies that hit too close to home, all laced with calls for racial equality and anti-capitalist fervor. To the disenfranchised, black families fleeing Jim Crow, white working-class drivers, he was a beacon. "I'm a prophet," he'd declare, eyes blazing, sent to liberate the oppressed. By the late 1960s, the temple had ballooned to thousands, its members pooling resources into communal living experiments. Jones positioned himself as God's vessel, blending Christianity with Marxism in sermons that quoted Mao alongside Matthew. He was admired, even courted by politicians like San Francisco's liberal elite, who saw him as an ally in the fight for civil rights. Behind the scenes, though, Jones cultivated a godlike aura, demanding absolute loyalty, surrounding himself with an inner circle called the Planning Commission that enforced his will. But soon, whispers began to spread through the temple's ranks. What had started as a movement for equality was morphing into something far more insular. Jones, now in his 40s, was addicted to painkillers after a mild stroke, his health a constant specter. Paranoia crept in. He preached of government conspiracies and assassination plots, staging fake attacks on himself to test his followers' devotion. Relocating the temple to Ukiah, California, in 1971, he built Jonestown, a remote agricultural commune, as a bulwark against the end times. It was sold as paradise, free from racism, poverty, and persecution. Members signed over their assets, worked grueling hours in the fields, and attended nightly white nights, dress rehearsals for mass suicide, where Jones tested their resolve with cyanide-laced drinks, only to call it a drill at the last moment. The fall came gradually, then all at once. By 1977, defectors began surfacing, their stories painting Jones not as savior, but as tyrant. He beat dissenters in padded rooms, isolated children from parents, and coerced sexual favors from women under the guise of spiritual bonding. One former member, Jeannie Mills, published 6 Years with God, exposing the abuses. Jones fled to San Francisco, where his political clout bought silence, but the pressure mounted. Fearing extradition and raids, he airlifted his flock, over 900 souls, to Jonestown in Guyana, a former British colony on the edge of the Amazon. There, in the humid isolation, the commune became a prison. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, shortwave radios monitored U.S. news, and Jones's sermons grew apocalyptic, warning of nuclear war and racial holocaust. Revolutionary suicide, he called it, the only way to thwart the fascists closing in. What investigators found next would change everything, or rather, it was the investigators who stumbled into the abyss. Congressman Leo Ryan, a California Democrat known for probing cults, received pleas from families of temple members. In November 1978, he led a delegation to Jonestown, reporters, relatives, and NBC cameramen, all under the guise of a fact-finding tour. At first, Jones played the gracious host, tours of the cassava fields, testimonials from beaming residents. But cracks showed. A woman slipped Ryan a note begging for escape. As the group prepared to leave from the nearby airstrip, gunmen from Jones's Red Brigade ambushed them. Ryan was shot in the back, a bullet piercing his heart. 4 others died, including a defecting temple member. The survivors fled into the jungle as gunfire echoed. Back in Jonestown, Jones gathered his flock under a pavilion, his voice a gravelly rasp over the loudspeaker. "It's too late," he intoned, as sobs rippled through the crowd. He blamed the attack on the visitors, declaring white nights over. This was the real thing. Medical staff mixed cyanide into the punch. Nurses injected those too young or afraid to drink. Infants wailed as syringes plunged into their mouths. Jones paced, microphone in hand, urging calm. Die with dignity. Over 900 perished, men, women, children, their bodies stacked like cordwood in the tropical heat. Only a handful survived, hiding in the bush or swimming the river to freedom. When U.S. troops arrived days later, the stench was unbearable. Autopsies revealed sedatives in many systems, suggesting not all went willingly. The trial, if it could be called that, was a post-mortem farce. Jones lay among the dead, a single bullet in his head, self-inflicted or staged. No one could say for sure. Guyana's government, overwhelmed, handed the bodies to the U.S., where pathologists worked in refrigerated tents at Dover Air Force Base. No courtroom drama unfolded. Instead, congressional hearings dissected the failures, how the State Department ignored warnings, how Jones's donation silenced critics. Survivors like Stephen Jones, the leader's son, testified to the brainwashing, the fear that bound them. Marceline, Jones's wife, had drunk the poison too. Her body recovered with the others. The temple dissolved in lawsuits and shame, its assets seized to compensate victims' families. But justice felt hollow. No gavel fell on the architect of Jonestown. In the aftermath, the world grappled with the fragility of faith. Jonestown exposed how charisma could cloak coercion, how the promise of utopia invites its own undoing. Over 300 children died that day. Their tiny forms a testament to the perils of unquestioned devotion. Today, the site is reclaimed by jungle, a quiet scar on the earth, but the echoes linger in every cautionary tale of blind allegiance. What drives a man to equate salvation with slaughter? In Jones's case, it was the intoxicating blend of power and prophecy, where God's voice became his alone, and the faithful followed into silence. He preached paradise on earth, until he poisoned it forever. Case 2, David Koresh, the Lamb of Waco. A self-proclaimed messiah stockpiled enough guns and brides to spark his own end times, only for federal agents to turn his fortress into a funeral pyre. 76 lives lost in a blaze that illuminated the blurred line between faith and fanaticism. It was April 19, 1993, outside Waco, Texas, and David Koresh had bet everything on a biblical showdown. But what twisted a guitar-strumming songwriter into the spark of America's most infamous siege? Vernon Wayne Howell was born in 1959 in Houston, the product of a teenage mother and an absentee father, growing up in a world of hand-me-down clothes and second chances. Dyslexic and awkward, he found refuge in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, memorizing scripture with a photographic intensity that stunned his elders. By 19, he was married to a 10-year younger woman, fathering a child while drifting through odd jobs: carpenter, repairman, musician scraping by in Houston's underbelly. Music was his outlet. He'd strum apocalyptic folk tunes in smoky bars, his voice a haunting drawl that hinted at deeper unrest. But it was religion that claimed him fully in the early 1980s, when he joined the Branch Davidians, a splinter sect of Adventists holed up on a 77-acre compound near Waco, led by the iron-willed Lois Roden. Howell, soon rechristened David Koresh, blending the biblical King David with Cyrus the Great, arrived as a seeker, but quickly revealed his ambitions. He claimed visions. God had anointed him the Lamb from Revelation, the only one worthy to unseal the 7 seals and usher in the apocalypse. Roden, a widow in her 60s, fell under his spell, their affair scandalizing the group and igniting a power struggle. When Lois died in 1986, Koresh seized control, ousting her son George in a bloody shootout that left no fatalities, but marked him forever. He renamed the compound Mount Carmel, after the biblical site of Elijah's triumph, and rebuilt it into a fortress of faith, barracks for communal living, a chapel for fiery sermons, and vaults for his growing arsenal. To his followers, mostly drawn from the fringes, disillusioned families, Vietnam vets, single mothers, he was a prophet with a plan. He preached a doctrine of spiritual wives, drawing from Old Testament polygamy, amassing a harem of 24 women, some as young as 12, including Lois's daughter. His charisma was magnetic, Bible studies that stretched into dawn, guitar-accompanied prophecies that wove Dylan lyrics with Daniel's dreams. By 1990, the Davidians numbered around 130, self-sufficient farmers and craftsmen, admired in Waco for their thrift and piety, until the whispers of child abuse and illegal weapons began to pierce the compound's walls. The fall accelerated in 1987, when a raid on a Davidian offshoot uncovered machine guns and grenades, drawing federal eyes. Koresh, ever the dramatist, escalated. He fathered children with underage brides, enforced soul sleep, discipline where dissenters were beaten or starved, and drilled his flock in paramilitary exercises, convinced the government was the beast of revelation closing in. Paranoia festered. He locked the gates, blacked out windows, and broadcast sermons via shortwave, railing against the jackboot thugs of the ATF. One spiritual wife, a 14-year-old, fled in 1992, her affidavit detailing rapes and rifles, enough for a warrant. But Koresh's inner circle, the five dwellers, shredded evidence and fortified, turning Mount Carmel into a maze of booby traps and bunkers. What investigators found next would change everything, though it started with a botched delivery. On February 28, 1993, ATF agents, disguised as Texas Rangers, approached with a search warrant for illegal firearms. Koresh, spotting the ruse through a peephole, barricaded the door and phoned his lawyer. Chaos erupted. Agents stormed the grounds in cattle trailers, met with a hail of bullets from the tower. 4 ATF men died in the initial volley. 6 Davidians fell inside. The survivors retreated, digging in for a 51-day siege. The FBI took over, surrounding the compound with tanks and snipers, blaring Tibetan chants and rabbit slaughter sounds to break Koresh's spirit. Negotiators coaxed out 35 people, including children, but Koresh toyed with them, promising surrender after finishing his new light revelation, a rambling manuscript on the seals he'd dictate over the phone. Inside, tensions boiled. He fathered another child amid the standoff, rationed food to loyalists, and preached that death would prove their faith. Intelligence reports painted a powder keg, methane tanks, fuel dumps, enough explosives to level the site. The Clinton administration, scarred by Ruby Ridge, debated assault versus patience, but whispers of child abuse tipped the scale. The trial unfolded in flames, a climax no courtroom could contain. On April 19th, Attorney General Janet Reno greenlit a tear gas assault, FBI tanks punching holes in walls to insert CS canisters. Koresh, in a bathrobe, promised compliance, then vanished into the chapel. Gunfire crackled sporadically, whether from Davidians or agents, accounts conflict. By noon, fire erupted in 3 spots, winds fanning it into an inferno that engulfed the wooden structures. Thermal cameras later showed figures trapped, doors chained shut from inside. 76 bodies emerged from the ashes, charred adults clutching Bibles, children curled in alcoves, Koresh himself shot in the forehead, a .22 pistol nearby. Suicide or fratricide, the forensics debated. Autopsies revealed no gas masks on most, suggesting deliberate martyrdom. Survivors, like Clive Doyle, insisted it was mass suicide ordered by Koresh. Others decried federal overreach. The 11 who surrendered faced trial in 1994, convicted on lesser charges, like voluntary manslaughter, sentences ranging from 3 to 40 years, though appeals chipped away at convictions, citing entrapment. In the aftermath, Waco became a wound on the national psyche, fueling militia movements and congressional probes that lambasted the FBI's tactics. Mount Carmel was bulldozed, rebuilt by survivors as a quiet memorial, but the ghosts lingered, Koresh's surviving wives raising his children in the shadow of infamy. It exposed the deadly dance between zealotry and state power, where prophecy meets firepower, and neither yields. How does a man rewrite scripture to justify his sins? In Koresh's world, he was the lamb slain, yet it was his flock that burned. He sang of the end times, until he set them ablaze. If cases like this fascinate you, subscribe to the Crime O'Clock, where every mystery has a ticking timeline waiting to be uncovered. Case 3, Marshall Applewhite, the Comet's Chosen One. Picture this: 39 men and women, dressed in identical black tracksuits and pristine Nike sneakers, meticulously arranging their bodies on mansion floors before swallowing a fatal cocktail of phenobarbital and vodka. It was March 26, 1997, an upscale Rancho Santa Fe neighborhood near San Diego, and the Heaven's Gate cult had just boarded what they believed was a divine spacecraft hidden in the tail of Comet Hale-Bopp. But how did a former seminary student and music professor orchestrate the most tech-savvy mass suicide in modern history, luring even Silicon Valley's brightest into a celestial delusion? Marshall Huff Applewhite Jr. entered the world in 1931 in Spur, Texas, a windswept town where fundamentalist Christianity was as much a staple as Friday night football. The son of a Presbyterian minister, young Marshall was the picture of Midwestern promise, valedictorian, quarterback, and choir boy with a voice that could hush a congregation. He married his high school sweetheart, Ann Pierce, and built a life of quiet achievement. A degree from Austin College, a stint in the Army, then teaching music at the University of St. Thomas in Houston. To outsiders, he was the epitome of respectability, a slim, bespectacled intellectual who directed operas and lectured on Shakespeare, his baritone solos drawing applause in Houston's cultural scene. But beneath the polish, Applewhite wrestled with shadows: a failed marriage, a growing sense of alienation in the turbulent 1960s, and whispers of homosexual encounters that clashed with his upbringing's piety. By 1972, his world unraveled, divorced, jobless, and adrift in spiritual hunger. It was then, during a metaphysical conference in Houston, that he met Bonnie Nettles, a nurse and astrologer twice his age, whose talk of UFOs and ascended masters ignited a spark. They bonded instantly, dubbing themselves Bo and Peep, shepherds to the lost souls seeking enlightenment beyond earthly chains. What began as a quest for cosmic truth snowballed into the human individual metamorphosis, or him, a belief system blending Christianity, theosophy, and sci-fi eschatology. Applewhite and Nettles preached that humans were souls trapped in vehicles, bodies, redeemable only through a next-level upgrade via UFO abduction. They gathered followers in the American Southwest, nomadic caravans of seekers, mostly middle-class professionals, artists, and runaways, who abandoned careers and kin to join the classroom. Applewhite now positioned himself as a Christ-like figure, his once warm tenor sharpened into prophetic commands. Nettles, was his divine counterpart, a female Jesus to his male. Their message resonated in an era of Watergate disillusion and New Age boom. Surrender possessions, castrate desires, literally, for some men, and prepare for the mothership's pickup. By the mid-1970s, they had 20 core members, trekking from Colorado camps to Oregon forests, surviving on communal funds and odd jobs. Admired by some as enlightened gurus, they evaded scrutiny by staying mobile, their pamphlets promising overcoming human ways in a world hurtling toward collapse. T.I.'s cancer diagnosis in 1985 tested their bond. She died quietly, leaving due to claim her spirit had ascended, merging with his in a singular godhead. The fall deepened in isolation, as Du's visions grew unhinged. Grieving T, he attempted suicide by overdose, surviving to interpret it as a failed demonstration of faith. The group, now whittled to a devoted dozen, relocated to San Diego in 1993. Drawn by the city's UFO lore and proximity to space tech hubs. They rented a sprawling mansion, funded by web design gigs. Applewhite's followers, tech whizzes ahead of the curve, built sites for NASA contractors while preaching online. But paranoia festered. Du saw homosexuality as a lower-level sin, castrating himself in a Mexican clinic and urging male members to follow. He hoarded phenobarbital for fasting rituals, preached of Earth's recycling via comet, and monitored Hale-Bopp's approach as a signal. The crime crystallized in early 1997. No violence against outsiders, but a meticulously planned exodus. Members shaved heads, donned uniforms symbolizing purity, and penned farewell videos, calm, upbeat testaments to their graduation. On March 22nd, the first wave swallowed the brew, purple shrouds over faces to block temptation. Over 3 days, all 39 followed, bodies discovered in bunk beds and on mats, suitcases packed for the stars. What investigators found next would change everything, revealing a suicide as scripted as a sci-fi screenplay. A former member, Rio D'Angelo, once Richard Ford, had been excommunicated months prior for questioning Dew's edicts. Troubled by cryptic emails and a mass website update proclaiming Red Alert, he alerted authorities on March 26th. San Diego police, tipped by an anonymous 911 from the mansion's UPS delivery man noticing uncollected packages, breached the door to a scene of eerie serenity. 21 women and 18 men, ages 26 to 72, lying in repose with 10 bills and quarters in pockets for the afterlife toll. No struggle, no notes of regret, just VHS tapes where members, faces serene, explained their choice. We're going to that higher level. Autopsies confirmed the poison, barbiturates dissolved in applesauce, chased by vodka, death by respiratory failure within hours. The FBI swept the property, uncovering computers loaded with astronomy software tracking Hale-Bopp, journals detailing lessons on celibacy and UFO sightings, and a mothership diagram etched in Dew's handwriting. No criminal conspiracy emerged. It was voluntary, they ruled. Those shrinks diagnosed Applewhite with narcissistic delusion, his followers groomed into codependent bliss. The media frenzy painted Heaven's Gate as a cautionary pixel in the digital dawn, how chat rooms and comets could eclipse reason. The trial was a shadow play, justice chasing ghosts. No defendants stood. The dead were cremated swiftly, ashes scattered at sea per their wishes, though families fought for remains in tearful hearings. Applewhite's sister, a Texas schoolteacher, claimed his body for burial, decrying the cult's theft of her brother. Congressional inquiries probed cult deprogramming laws, but no charges stuck. Suicide's legal void leaving only civil suits from estranged kin, netting little against the group's meager estate. D'Angelo, the whistleblower, faced harassment from holdouts, but penned Not of This World, a survivor's elegy that humanized the lost without excusing the leap. In the aftermath, Heaven's Gate lingers as a spectral meme in internet lore, its website archived as a time capsule of Y2K-era zeal. Families mourn quietly, parents sifting through videos where sons called Earth a poisoned planet, daughters beaming of shedding density. It unmasks the allure of transcendence in a tethered age, where loneliness finds fellowship in the stars, and prophets trade pulpits for passwords. Why do the educated, the employed, the evolved, surrender to such cosmic cons? In Applewhite's orbit, salvation was just a comet's tail away, until it trailed into oblivion. He promised a ride to the heavens, yet delivered them straight to the stars' cold silence. Case 4, Shoko Asahara, the blind guru's Armageddon. He stared into the void of his own making, a man who blinded himself to glimpse the divine, only to unleash a colorless killer on Tokyo's morning rush, sarin gas that choked 13 lives and blinded thousands more in the name of Armageddon. It was March 20th, 1995, and Shoko Asahara's prophecies had poisoned the air of Japan's capital. But how did a half-blind yoga instructor from the fringes of society ascend to command a doomsday army willing to dissolve in the subways? Chizuo Matsumoto, later Shoko Asahara, was born in 1955 on Kyushu Island, the fourth of 7 children in a struggling family of tatami mat makers. Glaucoma stole most of his sight by age 6, leaving him with shadows and shapes, a disability that marked him as an outcast in post-war Japan's rigid hierarchy. Bullied and isolated, he navigated by memory and malice, excelling in Braille and rote learning to claw his way into Kumamoto University. There he dabbled in politics, running unsuccessfully for parliament as a nearsighted populist railing against the establishment. Failure turned inward. By 1974, he dropped out, married a fellow student, and pivoted to the booming New Age scene. Acupuncture, herbalism, and Chinese medicine peddled from a Tokyo storefront. To clients, he was a quirky healer, his thick glasses and wild hair belying a sharp tongue that promised cures for the soul's ailments. But Asahara hungered for more than remedies. He devoured Western occultism, Nostradamus, the Book of Revelation, and Eastern esoterica, blending them into a personal mysticism. In 1984, he founded Aum Shinrikyo, or Supreme Truth, in a cramped Shibuya apartment, drawing early followers from Tokyo's stressed salarymen and disillusioned youth with lectures on karma and kundalini. His pitch was seductive: yoga for stress relief, prophecies for purpose, all under his guidance as a living Buddha. By the late 1980s, the group swelled to thousands, its headquarters a sleek compound in Fujigako, funded by member dues and Asahara's side hustles in miracle teas. Politicians nodded approvingly at his anti-drug stance. The media dubbed him a modern mystic. Behind the incense, though, Asahara demanded guru status. Disciples shaved heads, wore robes, and tied fortunes, while he fathered children with acolytes in ritual tantric unions. The fall cracked open in the early 1990s, as Asahara's visions darkened from enlightenment to extermination. Citing failed election bids in 1990, where Aum ran 25 candidates, all routed, he declared Japan doomed by Western imperialism and nuclear peril. POA, he preached, a Tibetan term twisted to mean merciful killing to advance souls' reincarnation, became doctrine. The group militarized, labs for chemical weapons, farms for ricin, a fleet of trucks rigged for dispersal. Asahara, now fully blind from self-imposed austerities, starving his eyes in Himalayan caves to see God, gathered an inner cadre of elite scientists and ex-cops, the Vajra Squad, to execute his edicts. Paranoia bloomed. He saw enemies everywhere, rival cults, police informants, and ordered preemptive strikes. The first blood came in 1989, the murder of a Tokyo lawyer suing Aum for fraud, his family gunned down in a hit that screamed professional. More followed, defectors strangled with ropes blessed by Asahara, bodies dissolved in lye. By 1993, the cult's Kamakwashiki facility reeked of sarin experiments. Rabbits writhed in test chambers, and accidental leak killed sheep nearby, dismissed as farm mishaps. Asahara's sermons escalated, broadcast on Aum's TV network. The apocalypse loomed on March 20th, 1995, unless his holy war purified the impure. To his 10,000 followers, doctors, engineers, housewives, he was infallible, his blindness a badge of transcendence. The world saw a thriving religion. Insiders saw a theocracy where dissent meant death. What investigators found next would change everything. Unraveling a conspiracy, police eyed Aum after a cultist, poisoned himself, babbled confessions. As warrants loomed, Asahara greenlit the Tokyo assault. 5 two-man teams pierced subway cars with umbrella tips laced with liquid sarin, puncturing plastic bags that vaporized into the vents. Commuters convulsed mid-rush hour, eyes streaming, lungs seizing, as the gas, odorless and invisible, claimed its toll. Tokyo's hospitals overflowed. The emperor's own physician rushed antidotes. Within hours, raids swarmed Aum's compounds. Hazmat teams in Kamakwashiki unearthed vats of sarin precursors, rifles, and Asahara's throne room, walls etched with swastikas. The guru, holed up in a hidden bunker, was dragged out barefoot, muttering prophecies. Over 400 arrests followed, including scientists like Seiichi Endo, who detailed the program's horrors. Human experiments, VX nerve gas stockpiles enough to fell Tokyo twice. The trial stretched into a decade-long reckoning, a courtroom coliseum of confessions and contradictions. Asahara, 40 at capture, played the mad seer, feigning catatonia, shouting banana, mid-hearing, while his lawyer spun insanity. From 1996 to 2004, the Tokyo District Court heard from 250 witnesses, victims gasping through ventilators, families of the slain clutching photos, defectors like Ikuo Hayashi, who pierced the subways himself, weeping over his POA alibi. Revelations piled like evidence crates. Asahara's 1991 fatwa for 10,000 enemy deaths, anthrax labs, even a helicopter plot to spray sarin on the diet. He denied nothing, yet claimed everything divine. Prosecutors painted him as a megalomaniac, IQ tests showing genius warped by glaucoma's isolation. In 2004, the bench convicted him on 13 murders, sentencing death by hanging, upheld through appeals. His final words a ramble on cosmic justice. Co-defendants, 12 in total, drew life or death. Endo hanged in 2018, the last to swing. In the aftermath, Aum's remnants splintered into Aleph and Tikari no Wa, monitored like ticking bombs, their membership halved but unrepentant. Tokyo healed scarred. Annual memorials at Kasamigaseki Station, where commuters pause for the 13 names etched in brass. It forces reflection on faith's fragility in a secular age, how enlightenment's quest can curdle into atrocity when one man's blindness blinds a nation. Asahara's cult exposed the peril of unchecked charisma in crowded modernity, where a guru's whisper can weaponize the air we breathe. What alchemy turns healing hands to homicide? In his gospel, salvation demanded sacrifice, until the state sacrificed him instead. He sought to blind the world to save it, yet saw only his own noose. Case 5. Sun Myung Moon, the Messiah of mass weddings. In a vast arena echoing with chants and vows, thousands of strangers, handpicked by divine decree, were paired for eternity in a single spectacle of salvation, their unions blessed by a man who called himself the Lord of the Second Advent. It was 1960 in Seoul, and Sun Myung Moon had just launched the most audacious matchmaking ministry in history. But beneath the pageantry of peace, his unification church built an empire on coercion and cash, binding souls while binding fortunes. How did a Korean refugee from communist purges crown himself humanity's savior, evading empires of scrutiny for over half a century? Sun Myung Moon was born Yong Myung Moon in 1920 to Confucian farmers in what is now North Korea, the second of 13 children in a world unraveling under Japanese occupation. A bright boy with a penchant for fishing and folklore, he found his calling at 16 during a mountain prayer vigil, where, by his later account, Jesus appeared, tasking him with completing the unfinished mission of the crucifixion. The vision fueled a solitary quest, seminary studies in Japanese Pyongyang, interrupted by forced labor in a salt mine during World War II. As Korea split in 1945, Moon fled south, penniless and preaching a syncretic gospel, blending Christianity with shamanism, declaring himself the Messiah foretold in the Bible's book of Revelation. To his early flock, mostly war widows and orphans in bombed-out Busan, he was a paternal prophet, his round face and earnest eyes radiating resolve. "I am the true parent," he proclaimed, offering solace in a divided land. By 1954, he formalized the Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity, Unification Church for short, in a humble soul house, its doctrine centering on indemnifying humanity's sins through ritual suffering and mass matrimony. Moon's charisma drew intellectuals and laborers alike. He wrote Divine Principle, a dense tome reframing Genesis as a cosmic family feud, with him as the reconciler. Admired as a Cold War anti-communist, he courted South Korean generals and U.S. conservatives, his church swelling to 100,000 by the 1960s through door-to-door evangelism and fundraising teams hawking flowers and ginseng. In America, landing in 1971, Moon was the exotic elder statesman, dining with Nixon, testifying before Congress on godless Marxism. His followers, Moonies, were young idealists, their communal homes havens from Vietnam's shadow, their 40-day workshops blending therapy with theology. The fall whispered in the opulence that outpaced piety, as Moon's messianic mantle masked a machinery of manipulation. What began as spiritual matchmaking, blessing 24 couples in 1960, exploded into spectacles uniting 2,500 pairs from 50 nations by 1975. Strangers matched by church elders via astrological charts and resumes their honeymoon's communal vigils of prayer. Devotion demanded dollars. Members liquidated assets for the church's providence, hawking baubles on street corners under sleep deprivation, a practice dubbed heavenly deception when quotas loomed. Moon's inner circle, the family federation, enforced isolation, cutting ties with satanic relatives, staging exorcisms for doubters. By the 1980s, the church owned Washington Times, a fleet of fishing boats, and diamond mines in Argentina. Its $1.5 billion empire veiled as tithes. Scandals simmered, deprogrammers kidnapping brainwashed youth, lawsuits from jilted families, whispers of forced abortions in holy harems. Moon, now paunchy and silver-haired, preached polygamy for the elite, taking 4 wives in spiritual rites, while decrying America's moral decay. His 1982 perjury conviction in Japan for faking credentials barely dented growth. Instead, he pivoted to interfaith alliances, hosting summits with rabbis and imams under crystal chandeliers. To the world, he was a quirky billionaire peacemaker. To defectors, a puppeteer whose godly claims justified grooming and greed. What investigators found next would change everything, peeling back the velvet curtain on a global grift. The unraveling began in earnest with U.S. scrutiny in the 1970s, when Congressman Donald Fraser's 1977 hearings exposed church lobbying. $1 million funneled to Nixon's re-election via Korean CIA ties, codenamed Koreagate. Moon, green card holder turned citizen, railed against persecution in Yankee Stadium sermons, but the IRS eyed his tax-exempt status. The crime coalesced in 1981. Moon and Elder Tari Smith indicted for evading $450,000 in taxes on $1.6 million in unreported church funds, cash from Japanese followers smuggled as offerings. Prosecutors, sifting ledgers from Manhattan's Clearstory office, uncovered shell companies laundering donations into personal luxuries. Moon's $700,000 Bel Air estate, his son's Porsche collection. Witnesses, former treasurers, detailed the slight. Funds wired through unification subsidiaries like Happy World Incorporated, a candy firm that sweetened ledgers. Moon's defense, sovereign immunity as Messiah, his payments tithes, not income, but federal agents raiding safe houses, found ledgers in Korean script tallying, fox hunting quotas, code for aggressive soliciting. The probe widened to human trafficking claims. Filipina maids unpaid, Korean missionaries visa faked. By 1982, the net tightened, Moon's lawyers scrambling as apostates like Youngwon Kim spilled on doctrinal duress. The trial was a spectacle of sanctimony, unfolding in New York federal court from September 1982, where Moon, flanked by robed aides, faced a jury of skeptics. Prosecutors paraded 14 witnesses, accountants charting the 112,000 wire from Japan, labeled fish sales, but traced to member purses. Moon took the stand, his English halting through interpreters, insisting, "I am persecuted like Jesus," equating audits to Calvary. Shocks rippled, evidence of 160,000 in cashier's checks cashed personally, no W-2s filed. The defense summoned theologians to argue divine exemption, but Judge Kevin Thomas Duffy rebuffed, jailing a heckling follower mid-trial. After 3 days' deliberation, guilty on all counts, conspiracy and false filings. Sentenced to 18 months and $15,000 fine in 1984, Moon served 13 in Danbury minimum security, emerging to 3,000 cheering faithful. His prison indemnity, mythologized as redemptive suffering. Smith drew 5 months. Appeals crumbled by 1986. The church paid $1 million in back taxes, but the verdict chilled expansions. Japan's government raiding branches for fraud. Germany deporting missionaries. In the aftermath, Moon's empire endured, a hydra of 120 nations, his 2012 death at 92 passing the scepter to 13 squabbling heirs amid schisms. Mass weddings persist, now virtual, binding 40,000 annually in algorithmic bliss, while scandals simmer, lawsuits over elder abuse, exposés on diamond blood money. It compels a reckoning with faith's fiscal underbelly, how salvation salesmen can sanctify exploitation, turning believers into billboards for the boss's beatitude. Moon's legacy unmasks the thin veil between vocation and venality, where godly gambits gamble away at the gullible's grace. What seduces the seeking to surrender all for a stranger's say-so? In his theology, true love was arranged, yet often arranged to unravel. He matched mortals for heaven's harmony, while hoarding earth's gold alone. Case 6, Warren Jeffs, the polygamist prophet. From a solitary cell in Texas, a bearded visionary issued edicts that reshaped a desert dynasty, marrying girls as young as 12, exiling teenage boys to thin the herd of rivals, all while claiming God's direct line to his throne of plural wives. It was 2002, and Warren Jeffs had inherited a theocratic fiefdom in the Utah Badlands. But when DNA unraveled his divine bloodlines, the prophet who ruled from shadows faced a reckoning in chains. How did a soft-spoken accountant become the high priest of underage unions? His sermons a blueprint for a generation's stolen innocence. Warren Steed Jeffs entered the world in 1955 in Sacramento, California, the eighth of 10 sons to Rulon Jeffs, the aging prophet of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, FLDS, a polygamist offshoot that rejected mainstream Mormonism's 1890 renunciation of plural marriage. Raised in the Red Rock isolation of Short Creek, straddling Utah and Arizona, young Warren was the dutiful son, bespectacled, bookish, with a voice like hushed velvet that memorized scripture at 4. Homeschooled amid 50 siblings from his father's 20 wives, he absorbed the FLDS creed: obedience as exaltation, prophets as infallible, women as vessels for celestial increase. Rulon, a stern patriarch who ruled from a wheelchair, groomed Warren as accountant and chauffeur, tasks that honed his meticulous mind. To the 6,000 faithful in Colorado City, Arizona, their insular enclave of uniform homes and prairie dresses, Jeffs was unremarkable. The accountant balancing tithes, the choir director leading hymns, admired for his piety and proximity to power. He married his first cousin at 18, fathering a daughter, but subordinated his life to the prophet's will, fasting for visions and auditing ledgers that funneled church millions into Jeff's family coffers. As Rulon aged into his 90s, whispers of succession circled. Warren positioned himself as the one mighty and strong, his loyalty a ladder to the top. When Rulon died in 2002 at 92, leaving 20 widows and a fractured council, Jeff seized the scepter in a midnight purge, excommunicating rivals, consolidating control over the United Effort Plan, the church's 100 million land trust that owned every home and farm. The fall seeped through the sandstone walls like monsoon floods, as Jeff's revelations twisted doctrine into dynasty. He preached one-man rule from the pulpit of the Yearning for Zion Ranch, a 1,700-acre Texas outpost built as a bulwark against apostasy. Plural marriage ballooned. Jeffs claimed 78 wives by 2006, including girls trafficked from Canada, their union sealed in temple rites where he stood as eternal husband. Boys, deemed threats to the gene pool, were lost in droves. 1,000 exiled teens dumped on Las Vegas streets with bus tickets and Bibles, their crime. Budding testosterone challenging the prophet's monopoly. Girls fared worse. Placements assigned them as brides at 14. Pregnancies documented in secret journals Jeffs kept, tallying heavenly sessions with minors. Paranoia armored the compounds, cameras on every corner, loyalty tests via wiretaps, dissenters' homes seized under blood atonement threats. Jeffs shuttled between havens in a silver SUV, his black suit and unkempt beard a spectral silhouette, broadcasting sermons via smuggled tapes. God has given me every woman in this church. To outsiders, the FLDS was a quaint curiosity, their 10,000 souls a self-sustaining theocracy with a private police force and school board. But inside, fractures widened, wives whispering of rapes masked as revelations, boys hitchhiking homeward with tales of beatings. What investigators found next would change everything, a forensic fairy tale piercing the prophet's veil. The unraveling accelerated in 2004, when exiles like Brent Jeffs, Warren's nephew, sued, alleging childhood abuse in a secret room. Arizona's crackdown followed, truancy raids on FLDS schools, welfare probes into underage mothers on food stamps. Jeffs fled to Nevada, then Texas, wedding 12-year-old Marianne Jessup in a ceremony captured on camcorder, her small frame dwarfed by a shadow. The raid came April 3, 2008. Texas Rangers, tipped by a domestic violence call to the YFZ ranch, stormed the Pastel Trailer Park, posing as a Bible camp. Over 400 children seized, their interviews painting horror, polygamy primers at age 8, wife training for tweens. DNA swabs from hairbrushes matched Jeffs to underage brides. FLDS-issued phones yielded texts ordering silence. Fleeing a fugitive warrant, Jeffs crashed his truck near Las Vegas, ranting of end times before arrest, a microcassette in his pocket confessing sins of the flesh. The FBI pieced the puzzle. 24 plural wives confirmed, journals chronicling assaults on girls as young as 8, church funds laundering $1 million in cash seizures. Alyssa Wall, a lost girl turned whistleblower, detailed her forced marriage at 14, her testimony a scalpel to the theocracy. The trial climaxed in San Angelo, Texas, from July 2011, a sweltering courtroom where Jeffs, silent and shackled, let God defend him. Representing himself after firing lawyers, He invoked Fifth Amendment 200 times, then erupted in glossolalia, babbling prophecies mid-hearing, scrawling, "I am the prophet" on pads. Prosecutors unleashed the arsenal. Wall's tearful account of consummation under duress, DNA linking Jeffs to a 15-year-old's pregnancy, audio of him preaching child brides as pure vessels. Shocks cascaded, testimony from 16-year-old brides, raid footage of toddlers in prayer hoods, financial trails showing tithes bankrolling his escapes. The jury, unmoved by his messianic mutterings, deliberated 2 days. Guilty on 2 counts of sexual assault of a child, life plus 20 years in 2011. Appeals dissolved. Co-conspirators like Church Bishop Fred Jessup drew probation for obstruction. The FLDS splintered. Jeffs' edicts from solitary ignored as apostates reclaimed the ranch. In the aftermath, Colorado City's uniforms faded. Lost boys reuniting with families in therapy circles. Survivor memoirs, like Wall's stolen innocence beacons for the reformed. Jeffs, now 69, rots in Louisiana's Pollock prison, his beard gray, visions voiceless. It lays bare the rot of inherited holiness, how patriarchal prophecies can peddle purity as predation, exiling the innocent to empire's edge. The FLDS saga reflects on authority's abyss, where one man's communion corrupts a community's core, turning Scripture's promise into a prison of flesh. What compels the compliant to crown cruelty as covenant? In Jeffs' revelation, God favored the few, until the law favored the forsaken. He wed widows to the word of God, yet chained himself to a cell of his own making. Case 7. Yahweh ben Yahweh, the Black Messiah's blood oath. In the neon haze of 1980s Miami, a silver-tongued street preacher demanded his disciples sever a white man's ear as a trophy of allegiance, whispering that only through blood could the black nation reclaim its throne in God's kingdom. It was October 1981, and Yahweh ben Yahweh's Temple of Terror had just baptized a city in murder. 14 lives spilled to appease a deity who bore his name. But what alchemy transformed a mild-mannered teacher from Arkansas into the architect of a racial apocalypse? His gospel ablaze in the night. Hewlin Mitchell Jr. was born in 1934 in Enid, Oklahoma, the only child of a strict Baptist minister and a homemaker who instilled in him a love for books and the pulpit. Tall and bespectacled, with a voice like rolling thunder, young Hewlin was the golden boy, Eagle Scout, debate champion, valedictorian at his segregated high school. He chased higher callings to Arkansas Agricultural, Mechanical Normal College, then Bethune-Cookman in Florida, earning a degree in education while preaching youth revivals that drew crowds with their blend of scripture and social fire. To his congregants, he was a rising star, eloquent, ambitious, a man who married young, fathered 3 children, and taught elementary school in Atlanta with a patience that masked his inner storm. But the 1960s radicalized him. Malcolm X's militancy, King's assassination, the fires of Watts, exposing the limits of white Christianity's grace. Mitchell devoured the Bible anew, rejecting its slave master, chains for a black Hebrew Israelite strain, claiming African Americans as the true lost tribes of Israel. In 1969, he founded the Black Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem, a tiny Miami mission house where he rechristened himself Yahweh ben Yahweh, God, Son of God. Declaring himself the Black Messiah, returned to shatter Babylon. His early flock, poor laborers, ex-cons, single mothers, saw salvation in his suits and smiles, his sermons weaving Ezekiel with Elijah Muhammad, promising reparations through revelation. By the late 1970s, the Temple of Love swelled to 300, its Moorish-style mosque in Liberty City a beacon of black pride, funded by member dues and Mitchell's side gigs in real estate. Politicians courted him for votes. The community hailed his drug rehab programs and youth leagues. Beneath the Brotherhood, though, Yahweh groomed an elite cadre, the Brotherhood, or Death Squad. Handpicked enforcers sworn to secrecy, their initiations laced with oaths of violence against white devils. The fall ignited in the powder keg summers of 1981, when Yahweh's prophecies curdled into commandments carved in carnage. He preached of Armageddon's spark, a 10% war where the righteous would slaughter the pale horde, earning keys to the holy city. To join the inner sanctum, prospects had to prove loyalty with acts of atonement. Murders of whites, their body parts harvested as grisly talismans. Yahweh, ensconced in a waterfront mansion with a fleet of Cadillacs, orchestrated from afar, his Bible studies doubling as war councils. The Brotherhood struck in shadows, a tourist stabbed on Ocean Drive, his ear sliced as a trophy, a vagrant decapitated, head delivered in a cooler, a widow beaten to pulp in her bungalow, bodies piled, 14 confirmed by trials tally, throats slit or bludgeoned, dumped in canals like offerings to the Everglades. Yahweh justified it as divine surgery, excising Satan's spawn to midwife the Black Millennium. Paranoia armored the temple, armed guards at every door, defectors branded with hot irons, a hit list of rivals from rival sects to nosy reporters. To Miami's black enclaves, he remained a benevolent Baba, his soup kitchens steaming while his squad sharpened shivs. But the blood trail led upward, witnesses glimpsing Yahweh's Rolls Royce at crime scenes, his sermons swelling with praise for the warriors of God. What investigators found next would change everything, a mosaic of mutilations mapping back to the mosque's minaret. The spree peaked October 11, 1981, with Anthony Brown, a drifter beaten, shot, and dumped in the Miami River, his ear mailed to a Brotherhood safe house. Brown's sister, scouring canals, ID'd him from a sketch. Detectives, sifting the detritus, noted the ritual precision, no robbery, just rage. A tip from a terrified initiate cracked the vault. Robert Rozier, a former NFL player turned Yahweh's enforcer, flipped under immunity, detailing 18 missions, ordered by the Messiah himself. FBI raids swarmed the temple September 1986, flashbangs shattering stained glass, seizing address books coated with hits, Polaroids of severed digits pinned like medals. Yahweh, arrested in his opulent office mid-sermon, clutched a Bible, proclaiming, "I am God. You cannot touch me." The probe unearthed horrors, safe houses stocked with machetes, a trophy room of Polaroids logging kills, wiretaps capturing Yahweh's voice. "Bring me a dead white man, and you're in." Over 100 witnesses surfaced, wives spilling of ritual rapes, accountants tracing tithes to hitman payoffs. The Miami River Task Force, dubbed Operation Green Shadow, linked Yahweh to bombings of Jewish centers and to synagogue arson, his anti-white screeds a blueprint for Black Liberation Army crossovers. The trial erupted in 1990 Miami Federal Court, a 3-month maelstrom where Yahweh, 56 and silver-maned, played the persecuted deity, refusing counsel, cross-examining victims with scripture, his robes flowing like Judgment Day. Prosecutors, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Richard Klain, paraded the grisly gallery. Photos of Anthony Brown's earless corpse, survivor testimonies of beatings that echoed Yahweh's atonement edicts. Shocks thundered, Rozier's confession tape, Yahweh praising a murder as beautiful work. A follower's account of Yahweh blessing a garrote before a hit. The defense spun sovereignty. Yahweh as prophet, killings as self-defense against systemic racism. But the jury, diverse in a city still raw from 1980 riots, saw through the sanctimony, deliberating 4 days before convicting on 14 RICO counts, conspiracy to murder among them. Sentenced to 30 years in 1992, Yahweh smirked, "Justice is blind, but God sees." Appeals dragged to 1994, upheld. Co-defendants like Rozier drew 22 years, turning state's evidence to shave time. The temple crumbled, assets seized for $1 million in restitution, its remnants scattering to fringe cells. In the aftermath, Miami's scars faded under palm fronds, but Yahweh's shadow lingers in Hebrew Israelite offshoots. Their street corner cries a faint echo of his thunder. Released on compassionate grounds in 2001 at 66, frail with diabetes, he died in 2010, unrepentant, preaching from a wheelchair till the end. It confronts the combustible core of identity faith, how oppression's fire can forge messiahs from malice, turning Scripture's shield into a sword against the self-same humanity it seeks. Yahweh's cult unmasks the peril of prophetic isolation, where one man's God glorifies gore, and the oppressed become oppressors in disguise. What whispers from the margins make murder a mandate? In his black Bible, redemption ran red, until the law drained the chalice dry. He demanded blood to birth a nation, yet spilled his own in chains. Case 8. Rock Terrio, the surgeon saint of the wilderness. Deep in the frozen Quebec bush, a self-anointed healer wielded a chainsaw like a scalpel from heaven, severing limbs and souls in the name of divine surgery. his congregation of 26 children and broken believers huddling around fires that warmed no one. It was 1984, and Rockterios' Antarctic cult had carved a kingdom from the taiga, where God's voice demanded amputations as absolution. But how did a mill worker's son, once a teetotaler preaching family values, transmute faith into a frenzy of flesh and fanaticism? Rockterio was born in 1947 in the Sorrel Tracy Mill town on the St. Lawrence River, the eldest of 9 in a devout Catholic brood where Sundays meant rosaries and reprimands. Slight and sharp-eyed, with a mop of dark curls, young Rock chafed at the catechism's constraints, devouring the Bible instead for its raw poetry, David's Psalms, Moses' miracles. By 17, he wed Lucien, a factory girl, and fathered a son, but the routine of pulp mills and paycheck drudgery soured him. He quit drinking, joined Alcoholics Anonymous, and found his pulpit there, his teetotal testimonies drawing crowds with their fervor. To neighbors, he was the reformed everyman, a handyman fixing roofs, a storyteller spinning yarns of Eden lost, admired for his thrift and tenderness toward his growing flock of kids. In 1975, disillusioned with Vatican corruption, Terrio splintered off, founding the Anthill Kids, a back-to-the-land commune blending Seventh-day Adventism with his own revelations. He gathered 12 families in the Laurentian Hills, 100 miles north of Montreal, drawn by his promise of purity. No meat, no medicine, just prayer and potatoes in a hand-built village of log cabins dubbed the Garden. Terrio, now Moise, Moses reborn, preached polygamy as biblical restoration, claiming visions where God bid him multiply to repopulate paradise. His charisma crackled, bonfire sermons quoting Revelation, folk songs on guitar that wove Genesis with Greenpeace anthems. Members signed over deeds, worked dawn to dusk felling timber, and hailed him as healer, his poultices and prophecies mending fevers without a doctor's dime. By 1978, the commune thrived in isolation, a 30-strong family insulated from inflation and infidelity. Terrio's 13 children, by multiple wives, frolicking as proof of providence. The fall crept in with the first thaw of 1978, when isolation's bomb turned to gangrene. Terrio's visions veered violent. God, he claimed, spoke through his acts, demanding operations to excise sin, literal cuttings to purge spiritual rot. What started as ritual scarification, whippings for impure thoughts, escalated to butchery. Solange Boilard, a 21-year-old convert, suffered appendicitis. Terrio, drunk on revelation, delivered her demon with a kitchen knife, botching the incision until she bled out on the dirt floor. He raped her corpse, declaring it a spiritual union, then ordered the group bury her in a shallow grave, her death a martyrdom for the faithful. Emboldened, he crowned himself surgeon saint, performing miracles with rusted tools, teeth yanked sans anesthetic, gallbladders gouged in candlelight. Paranoia frosted the camp, defectors branded Judas, wives rotated in his bed as tithes, children beaten for questioning the bloodletting. By 1984, the Anthill Kids numbered 40 souls, scattered in snowbound shacks, their diet of roots and rabbit leaving them gaunt, while Terrio feasted on venison, his belly swelling with beer brewed from forbidden grains. He fathered 26 children total, assigning placements like livestock, his sermons slurring into tirades against the Sodom below. To the rare mount to fly over, it was a hippie holdout. Inside, the air reeked of rot and regret, Solange's ghost a silent sentinel. What investigators found next would change everything, thawing a horror preserved in permafrost. The unraveling began Christmas 1988, when Gabrielle, one of Terrios' wives, fled the bush with her children, hitchhiking to a Gasconia hospital where frostbite masked deeper wounds, scars from God's knife. Her affidavit, whispered to social workers, detailed the necrophilia, the live burials of dissenters, the chainsaw cesareans that claimed newborns. Quebec provincial police launched Operation Snowblind in January 1989, snowmobiles slicing through drifts to the commune's edge, where emaciated sentries surrendered without a shot. Officers breached the main lodge to a tableau of terror, blood-stained mattresses, jars of healing, organs on shelves, Terrio barricaded in his throne room, with a hammer, ranting of apocalyptic avengers. The raid yielded horrors, Solange's exhumed remains, mutilated by post-mortem enhancements, a ledger of 20 surgeries. including a man's foot hacked off for doubting. Witness accounts of Terrio raping a 13-year-old stepdaughter under divine mandate. Ballistics traced a 1987 shotgun blast, Terrio executing a traitor in the woods to stolen ammo. Forensic teams sifted ash pits for bone fragments, confirming 3 more murders. Over 30 survivors, ribs visible under parkas, spilled in debriefs. Tales of forced abortions via coat hangers. Trials where guilt meant emasculation. Terrio, arrested in handcuffs that chafed his prophet's wrists, confessed fragments to interrogators, blaming Satan's tricks. The trial unfolded in 1993 Chuarvira's Superior Court, a stark chamber where Terrio, 46 and wild-haired, stood as his own advocate, quoting Leviticus to the bench, his voice a venomous psalm. Crown prosecutors dissected the decade. Gabrielle's testimony of the 1988 killing of another wife, stabbed during a session, her body incinerated in a barrel. Medical experts charting infection trails from botched ops, sepsis claiming 2 more. Shocks reverberated, videotapes of healings. Terrios' laughter over a convulsing patient. Child witnesses, now teens, drawing diagrams of the surgery table. He cross-examined with curses, claiming immunity as God's vessel, but the 12-person jury, loggers and librarians, saw savagery, not sanctity. Convicted February 1993 on 2 counts of first-degree murder, plus assault and unlawful confinement. He drew life, without parole, plus 20 years. Co-accused wives turned state's evidence for leniency, drawing house arrest. The commune dissolved, children funneled into foster care. In the aftermath, the Laurentians reclaimed the cabins as Rod and Vine, a provincial park plaque murmuring of tragedy in the wilds. Terrio, transferred prisons after shank attacks, died in 2018 of a beating by inmates. His surgery, reversed in a cell block brawl. Survivors, like daughter Anne-Marie, rebuilt in anonymity, their scars a map of misplaced mercy. It probes the primal pull of patriarchal piety, how wilderness whispers can warp a healer into a horror, turning communal dreams to communal graves. Terrio's tale reflects on isolation's intoxicant, where one man's Messiah complex mutilates the many, and faith's fire forgets its flock. What delirium dresses dismemberment as devotion? In his frozen gospel, salvation was severed, until the state stitched the silence shut. He cut away sin to reveal the divine, yet unearthed only his own damnation. Case 9. Charles Manson, the helter-skelter oracle. Locked in a boys' reformatory cell in 1949, a 14-year-old delinquent pressed his ear to the wall, swearing he heard the radio waves of God whispering secrets of coming chaos, secrets that, 2 decades later, would arm his ragtag family with knives and destiny, carving a bloody prophecy into Hollywood's hills. It was August 8, 1969, and Charles Manson's divine broadcast had just gone live in a symphony of screams. But what static turned a street urchin's survival smarts into a siren's song for slaughter, seducing the flower children into becoming harbingers of hell? Charles Millis Manson was born in 1934 in Cincinnati's underbelly, to a teenage prostitute mother who named him after a conman dad she barely knew. Kathleen Maddox, 16 and wild, dragged young Charlie through a carousel of foster homes and flophouses, her bourbon-fueled rages leaving bruises that badges couldn't hide. By 5, he was a ward of the state, shuttled to Indiana schools, where he learned lockpicking over letters, pilfering candy for camaraderie. A bright spark dimmed by neglect, Charlie devoured comics and crime novels, dreaming of outlaws as kin. To the rare adults who noticed, social workers, juvenile judges, he was a feral poet, slight, blue-eyed, with a grin that disarmed, reciting poetry that masked the hurt. Released at 12 into his mother's indifferent arms, he honed his hustle, boosting bikes, forging checks, landing in reformatories by 13, where sodomy charges and escape attempts earned him the Little Charlie Chaplin moniker for his Chaplin-esque moxie. Paroled at 19 in 1954, he married a hospital receptionist, fathering a son he named Michael, but the bottle and wanderlust pulled him west. In Los Angeles, Manson traded prison for parole, charming his way through odd jobs and orgies, his guitar-strummed tunes, Dylan-esque laments of loneliness, drawing strays to his flame. By 1967, the summer of love bloomed, and Manson, 32 and parole fresh, positioned himself as guru, a drifter in bell-bottoms, preaching free love and acid visions from a stolen dune buggy. He gathered the family, runaways like Lynette Squeaky from pregnant teens fleeing Bible Belt belts at Spawn Ranch, a crumbling movie set in the San Fernando Valley, trading chores for his love-ins. To Haight-Ashbury hitchhikers, he was the Pied Piper of peace, a vegetarian visionary quoting How to Win Friends alongside the Sermon on the Mount, his charisma a salve for the scarred. Hollywood edges noticed. Beach Boy Dennis Wilson housed him briefly. Producer Terry Melcher auditioned his songs, admiring the ex-con's raw riffs, blind to the control coiling beneath. The fall crackled through the canyon nights of 1968, when Manson's revelations warped from harmony to Holocaust. Tuned to what he called God's radio, the Beatles' White Album as divine code, he decoded Helter Skelter, Paul McCartney's Rocker as prophecy, a race war where blacks would rise against whites, the family emerging from a desert pit to rule the ashes. God, via the grooves, commanded provocation, murders pinned on the Black Panthers to ignite the spark. Terrio's commune was child's play. Manson's was a Manson family of 20, mostly women enthralled by his mescaline massages and mattress prophecies, men like Tex Watson as enforcers. Drugs dulled doubts, isolation at Barker and Myers ranches sharpened blades. The crime ignited August 8, 1969. Manson, eyes wild with end times urgency, dispatched Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian to 10050 Cielo Drive, Melcher's former pad, now actress Sharon Tate's. No grudge, just symbolism. Tate, 8 months pregnant, her guests. Hairstylist Jay Sebring, heir Steve Parent, Folger coffee heiress Abigail Folger, writer Wojciech Frykowski, slashed and shot in a frenzy of pigs scrawled in blood. Tate begged for her unborn son's life. Atkins later boasted of lapping it from her wounds. The next night, Manson led the charge to the La Bianca home in Los Feliz. Grocery owner Leno and wife Rosemary, bound and butchered. Forks in Leno's gut spelling, war wanted. 14-year-old Danny DiCarlo, a family hanger-on, supplied the .22. Manson directed the X carvings on foreheads as war paint. 5 dead in 48 hours, no loot taken, just messages for the apocalypse. To the family, it was Holy Writ. To Tate's circle, a drug-fueled home invasion gone cosmic. What investigators found next would change everything, threading a tapestry of terror from bloodied walls to beetle sleeves. LAPD's finest, led by Sergeants Paul Whiteley and William Gleason, arrived at Cielo Drive to a tableau of savagery. Tate's white nightgown torn, Sebring's blood pooling like ink. Bugliosi's team, later mythologized, chased false leads, Panther paranoia, hippie feuds, but Kasabian's immunity cracked the code. Her getaway drive, Watson's Texan twang in the melee. Raids on Spawn yielded .22 casings matching the Tate slugs. Atkins' jailhouse bragged to a cellmate, "I killed her, and I don't feel bad." Spilling the blueprint. Manson's swastika forehead tattoo, carved post-arrest, screamed motive. Diaries unearthed at Barker detailed helter-skelter drills, drug-fueled war games. The probe widened. Spawn owner George Spawn fingered the family's dune buggy joyrides. DiCarlo traded testimony for leniency, IDing the creepy little man as maestro. By December 1969, arrests snowballed, from's loyalty a firewall, but Kasabian's maps led to the Myers Ranch crematorium. Ashes sifted for evidence of more victims, though only the 5 surfaced. The trial was a circus of the damned, commencing July 1970 in downtown LA's Hall of Justice, where Manson, 35 and bearded, orchestrated chaos from the defense table. Bugliosi, the bulldog prosecutor, faced a quartet of defendants: Manson, Atkins, Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, chained to their seats, their XS evolving to swastikas mid-proceedings. Shocks detonated like flashbulbs, Kasabian's vivid vignettes of Tate's pleas. Atkins' courtroom collapse confessing the family way. Manson, defending himself in bursts, brandished White Album lyrics as alibi, shouting, "You don't understand me. You're trying to judge me by your standards." His cross-examination of witnesses a hypnotic harangue. The helter-skelter chapter unfolded. Experts decoding Beatles esoterica. Family acolytes like Paul Watkins testifying to desert death drills. Jurors sequestered 10 months, weathered death threats and courtroom scuffles. Manson lunging at Judge Charles Older with a pencil. Verdicts crashed January 1971. First-degree murder on all counts, conspiracy to boot. Sentenced to death in March, Atkins 8 months pregnant. Her appeals poetic. Commuted to life when Furman v. Georgia blanked the bench in 1972. Van Houten retried separately. Her parole bids denied till 2023. In the aftermath, the family fractured. From 1975 Ford assassination attempt landing her 34 years. Manson transferred prisons after shankings. Married twice in stir, dying of colon cancer in 2017 at 83. His I'm sorry to Tate's sister a hollow him. Spahn Ranch burned in a 1970 wildfire. A pyre for the era's illusions. Bugliosi's Helter-Skelter bestseller etched the myth. It confronts the counterculture's cracked mirror. How peace's pursuit can pervert into pogrom when a charlatan's chant drowns out conscience, turning liberation's lyrics to lyrics of loss. Manson's mania unmasks the void in visionary voids, where one man's frequency foments frenzy, and the age of Aquarius drowns in its own reflection. What frequency tunes terror to transcendence? In his celestial static, the end was just the beginning, until the gavel tuned it to silence. He broadcast the apocalypse on borrowed airwaves, yet the only war he won was within walls of his own design. Case 10. Joseph D. Mambro, the Solar Temple's eternal flame. In the crisp October dawn of 1994, flames licked the chalet roofs of 2 Swiss villages, consuming 48 souls who had chosen transit to a distant star, bodies arranged in ritual circles, passports tucked in pockets for the cosmic voyage, their leader's hologram still flickering in the ashes. It was the order of the Solar Temple's grand departure, a blaze that spanned 3 continents and claimed 74 lives in waves of holy arson. But how did a Parisian jewel thief, peddling fake miracles, forge a secret society of Europe's elite into willing pyres for his stellar scam? Joseph D. Mambro was born in 1930 in Haute-Savoie, France, a watchmaker's son in the shadow of Mont Blanc, where alpine winters taught him the art of sleight and survival. Slight and silver-tongued, with a flair for fine suits, young Joseph apprenticed in gem-cutting, his nimble fingers turning quartz to quartzite illusions. By his 20s, he was a fixture in Lyon's black market, fencing stolen baubles from aristocratic vaults, his charm disarming detectives as easily as dowagers. To the beau monde of 1950s Paris, he was the enigmatic importer, dining at Maxim's, whispering of Egyptian amulets that held the sun's fire. A brief marriage yielded a daughter, Emmanuelle, but divorce in 1956 freed him for grander cons. Founding the Center for the Preparation of the New Man in 1956, a metaphysical club blending Rosicrucian rites with UFO lore. D. Mambro, rechristened master, drew intellectuals, doctors, diplomats, disaffected Catholics, with seances staged via hidden projectors, his visions of Sirius the Dog Star promising rebirth. In 1973, he met Luc Juret, a Belgian homeopath and TV charmer, their alliance birthing the Ordre du Temple Solaire, OTS, in Geneva, a chivalric order for the elect, veiled as a wellness group. To Geneva's jet set, D. Mambro was the sage sophisticate, 54 at OTS's 1984 launch, balding but beaming, lecturing on Atlantis and apocalypse in gilded halls. Juret, the charismatic frontman, preached green living and Gnostic gospels. Together, they amassed 400 initiates, Swiss bankers, Canadian expats, French artists, tithed fortunes for missions to Brazil farms and Quebec lodges. Admired as eco-mystics, their retreats blended yoga with yachting. D. Mambro's fabricated relics, like a Templar sword, of gold-plated scrap, bedazzling believers. The fall smoldered in the 1980s, as D. Mambro's deceptions demanded deadlier drafts. Prophecies darkened, Earth, poisoned by materialism, required a transit to Sirius via ritual fire. Suicide as ascension, not despair. He hoarded a war chest from member dues, 1.5 million annually, funneling it to Swiss vaults and Uruguayan haciendas. His lifestyle allures, Porsches, Persian rugs, a harem of spiritual wives, including 29-year-old Chantal Goldschmidt, mother to his secret son Ellie. Paranoia kindled. Belgian raids in 1987 exposed arms caches and fake passports, forcing a schism where Juret took the public face. D. Mambro, the occult throne. The inner circle, the chain of light. dwindled to 100 zealots, vets widows, the wealthy weary, drilled in Omega protocols, cyanide capsules, farewell feasts, pyres prepped for the Great Passage. DiMambro faked miracles with ventriloquist dummies and laser lights, claiming apparitions of Jesus and Mary. Defectors like Antonio Riva, ousted for questioning funds, were slandered as Satanists. By 1993, the cult's Quebec chapter hosted white masses, LSD sacraments sealing vows of voyage, while DiMambro, exiled to a French chateau, dictated via coded couriers. The end loomed in 1994, unless the impure perished first. To outsiders, OTS was a fading fraternity. Insiders sipped hemlock dreams, their passports stamped for the stars. What investigators found next would change everything, igniting a multinational manhunt through embers and alibis. The inferno began October 4, 1994, in Cherry-en-Salvan, Switzerland. Chalets erupted, 25 adults and 14 children, including DiMambro's family, posed in star patterns on garage floors, shot or poisoned, then torched with gasoline trails leading to timed fuses. Plastic bags over heads, ritual daggers nearby, a note invoking Knights Templar rebirth. Days later, Montreal, 3 Druid loyalists gunned down in a council flat, throats slit as traitors. Quebecois police, alerted by smoke signals from neighbors, breached the ruins to passports charred but legible, French, Belgian, Canadian, and a video of Druid intoning, "We go to Sirius." Interpol linked it to a Morin Heights cabin blaze 6 weeks prior, 5 immolated, including 2 infants, their cribs doused in accelerant. The probe snowballed. Swiss feds raiding Geneva banks unearthed $93 million in bonds, coded ledgers tracing donations to DiMambro's Cayman accounts. Defectors spilled, Riva detailing the 1984 fake resurrection via hologram, a Canadian widow, Edith Toto, fingering Jurit's Montreux flat as arms depot, stocked with Uzis from Balkan smugglers. Ballistics matched the Montreal hits to OTS-issued pistols. Autopsies reveal barbiturates in the Swiss dead, staging suicides to mask murders. DiMambro and Jurit fled to a Dordogne forest, staged a final farce, shooting 2 Swiss witnesses, torching their Peugeot. Before cyanide kisses under oaks, bodies discovered November 5th, wrists slashed for show. The trial was a Pyrrhic postscript, justice chasing specters in smoke-filled salons. No living defendants. Instead, 1995 Swiss inquiries grilled 50 survivors, their testimonies a requiem. Goldschmidt's diary of DiMambro's rages, forcing her to transit the boy. Banker Jean-Francois Mayer charting the cult's Rosicrucian roots twisted to terror. Shock smoldered, evidence of a 1992 Morat murder, a defector beheaded for betrayal. Financial forensics exposing pyramid schemes preying on widows. Canadian courts charged 14 in absentia for the Morin Heights blaze, but statutes crumbled. France extradited none, deeming it secticide, not crime. Jurit's estate settled civil suits, $500,000 to orphans, while OTS remnants, the Solar Legacy, dissolved under surveillance, their 20 holdouts monitored as fire risks. The inquests closed in 1997, no criminal convictions, only coroner's verdicts of mass suicide, though forensics whispered fratricide. DiMambro purging leaks before his leap. In the aftermath, the Alp scars bloom with wildflowers over unmarked graves, annual vigils in Fribourg drawing kin who ponder the pull of polished phantoms. DiMambro's holograms, seized as exhibits, gather dust in vaults, relics of a radiance robbed. It etches a caution on charisma's counterfeit, how elite escapes can eclipse into extinction, turning temple vows to funeral flares. The solar temple's transit unmasks the stellar seduction of the solitary soul, where one thief's treasures tempt the title to torch tomorrow. What lights lure the learned to leap into legends lie? In DiMambro's Dog Star, eternity was engineered, yet dawn exposed the ashes artifice. He engineered stars from stolen sparks, until his heaven burned to barren ground. What's your take on the story? Share your thoughts below, and subscribe to the Crime O'Clock, because the next mystery is already ticking.